Welcome and thank you for joining us today on A Lawyer and a Mediator Walk into a Bar. We'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from which we broadcast today and acknowledge their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hi, everybody. This is Paula. This show is not about legal advice. It's really just about our experiences going through the process in the family law courts, what can work, what doesn't work, what's for you to consider to try. And it's just about the process, giving you some familiarity with it, and hope that gives you a little bit of a help.
Hello and welcome back to A Lawyer and a Mediator Walk into a Bar. My name is Dianne Loveday and my friend and colleague
Paula Appelhans.
And today we are going to discuss separation, which might seem a little bit of a no-brainer, the idea of separation.
It has morphed into a huge concept now.
Yes.
What does it mean to separate?
Yes.
Are we really separated? We're separated.
Yeah.
We're doing things different, but we're still in the same house. We're still doing some things similar. What does it mean to really separate anymore? I think the financial and the pandemic in Melbourne and Australia have really exposed, solidified.
Also the lack of rentals and the cost of rentals.
And housing costs.
Yeah,
it used to be that you could just, okay, we're separating. We'll sell the house. We'll each go buy our own house. However we're going to do that. It was kind of like cut and dry. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we go.
Yeah.
But because, again, with the pandemic that came along, the financial crisis and the housing crisis, the rental crisis, I hate to say crisis, but all of these things have really morphed what it means to separate now. It's not as easy or cut and dry and visual even.
No, it's not. I've always offered a free 30-minute for people to come and explore their options. Always, and it's not been unusual for me to have somebody turn up and have that free 30-minute, and then I don't hear from them for another 12 months because they're trying to work out what they need to do.
Yeah, and sometimes they're still just trying to work it out. Is this what we really want to do?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sometimes while they're thinking that out, they're thinking all the enmeshment, the property, the bank accounts, the children. Maybe they have some properties. Maybe there's a business involved.
Yeah.
And how do you cut away from something? And is it easier just to stay?
Yeah.
And keep going and muck it out and, we'll be fine.
And then you see them when they've got to the point.
And then they come back and they're like, okay, we're here.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I see, I'm usually just dealing with one party at that point.
Right.
So I'm seeing somebody who might have explored their options, decided eventually that that's what they want to do. They come back and do their more comprehensive intake interview, and that's when we start talking about the options around being separated. How does that work for you? What are you doing at the moment? Are you under the one roof still? Has somebody moved out? Is there an intervention order in place? Now that's something that we really need to explore, the concept of an intervention order and how mediation can work in that space. Are you nesting?
What is nesting?
What is nesting? Nesting is where mum and dad move out of the house and the children stay in the house. So what it requires...
So the focal point is really the house.
The house. Yes, the house and the children. Keeping the children in the same space. So they aren't... So they're not...
Speak.
Yeah, they're not disadvantaged or dislocated in any way, shape or form.
So the perception is that they're not dislocated.
Yes,
moving around.
Yeah. So what then you have is some parents they might have another investment property that they will utilise. So they'll often do a week on and week off, and so the parent will move out into the investment property, and then the other parent is at the home, and then on a designated day they will swap over.
But they agree to some sort of rotation.
Yes.
In that. And is that agreement usually on their own, or do they come to you and say, how could this work?
Usually they've tried
something.
People will try that before they come to get a formalised agreement, because you don't need to use mediation or lawyers if you can come to your own arrangements. As a parent, there's no compulsion to do mediation or get consent orders or court orders.
And that's the whole thing. So as long as you guys are in agreement,
yep.
And you're not doing anything really that harms the children,
yeah.
In either perspective, you still have the ability to make decisions for the children.
Yep.
And, depending on their ages and how things are working out. It always comes down to everybody agrees until they don't.
Exactly. And that's when we see them.
And that's when I see them as well.
Yeah.
And I like to see them before the acrimony kicks in.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
That would be.
And occasionally we do get people come through who just want to formalise their agreement.
Exactly.
And that's lovely.
But again, there are ways to do that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there is something called a binding financial agreement, you know, and when the parties, they can do it before their relationship, during the relationship, after the relationship. There are provisions in the Family Law Act for married couples, de facto couples, which pretty much mirrors the married couples provisions. There are things that, again, like you said, if they're in agreement, the first thing I tell them is the more you guys agree, that's better.
Yeah.
And if you can agree on everything, even better.
Yes.
The challenge is having somebody come to me with what they perceive as an equal agreement.
Are we talking parenting or property?
Property.
Yeah, we have that same.
You're right. There are those distinctions.
Yeah.
So let's go back to So we have parenting options. We have parenting agreements, parenting arrangements. That as long as you guys are in agreement, nobody's going to interfere.
Yep.
Yeah. If you want to solidify that into a parenting plan, probably best to come to the mediator. If you need to solidify that as to a parenting order, you might want to get some advice on that as to how that looks. But either then when you come to property, there is something called that binding financial agreement. There is a binding child support agreement. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are options. I guess is really, let's just say that there are options.
Absolutely.
Options on how to separate, how to separate by agreement prior to, but at any point in time, everybody agrees until they don't.
Yeah.
But still, there are many processes. I think is what we really want to get across is that there are several processes involved that are favorable to if you're in agreement.
But and even if you're not, because that's the reality. Even when you are amicable in your separation, there is still a grieving process. There is often still somebody who feels a little bit aggrieved.
No, there's a loss.
Yeah.
There's a loss to the dreams you had together, loss to the life you're going to have, the history that you've had together. You're going to have to figure out how to shut that down. Maybe friends, families.
Yep.
There's all these other enmeshments involved, relationships involved.
Yeah, there's family members that now you're no longer their family. So there's all sorts of things to consider around how you move forward, and how you manage your separation is crucial to that. So getting on the front foot. I think my process is often an education process more than anything else. First off,
yes, your processes, absolutely. Again, distinction here.
Yes, my process.
It's not exactly my process.
No. My as a mediator, as a family law mediator, a big part of my role is to help educate people around the process of separation. Right. What's involved? What are your legal obligations? What are your rights? What are the kids' rights? Do you need a lawyer? At what point do you need a lawyer? How much do you need to engage with a lawyer? Where do you need to take this if it doesn't work? If we try and get an agreement, then where do you take it if we can't reach that agreement? So there's lots of ways around separating, so you can pick and choose where you can be under the one roof. I mean, people do that quite successfully. At the moment, we get a lot of that coming through. They're still under the one roof. They're managing the kids. They're trying to sort out their finances, and they get to a point where somebody it just isn't working. So that's when we see them.
Or they just don't know how to resolve something, because this isn't what they're used to doing.
No.
I mean, it really comes down to, it's like, it's really hard sometimes to know what your options are, because this isn't something you do. This isn't something you planned on having to do or planned on being part of, or, you said I do, or you moved in together with a commitment. There was no plan to do something different.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just don't know. And I think that's a really good topic to have, is you have options to separate.
Yep.
And it may mean that you separate under the same roof. So let's talk about what that looks like.
So again, it really does need clear defining rules and lines.
The more you have the rules defined, I think, the better everybody understands the boundaries.
Yes.
And how to just keep consistency.
And I'm a great believer in telling the kids. even if you're still under the one roof, because they're picking up on it anyway.
I was going to say, I'm sure the kids already know.
Yeah, exactly. But you'd be surprised. No, we haven't told the kids yet because, we don't want to upset them.
Like, seriously?
Yeah.
Those kids already know.
Exactly.
We're pragmatic here.
So let's
This is real.
Let's come up with the story. Let's come up with a story, sit down with the kids and explain to them this is what's happening.
And this is how we're going to manage this?
Yep.
This is doing right by everybody? Mm-hmm.
So then you're often helping people who are separated under the roof create those boundaries. Who still pays for bills? How do you manage that? Who still does all the cooking or all the laundry? Or do you divide that up?
You start really thinking who does what,
right, yeah.
What needs to be done versus what's maybe a luxury to be done.
Mm-hmm. And the big one is I try when I have people coming early in the process and they are under the one roof, I get them to try allocating every second weekend to one parent. So as the other parent can leave if they need to or want to and, start exploring life as a single person or just get away from a difficult situation or find something else to do or maybe even just lock themselves in another room if they've got enough space. So try and to give both parties an understanding of what's going to feel like to be 100% responsible for the care and well-being of the children.
For the time they have them, right?
Yes, because...
And maybe it's something that's an eye-opener. Maybe to one side more than the other.
Yes, often it is.
Male or female.
Yes,
it's really an eye opener when you have someone who stays at home.
Yeah,
because that is it is recognized in the family law court that somebody who is the primary caregiver, the home provider, allows the other person to explore, manage, grow in their profession, business. So without that, this person may not be able to have grown the business or do more to provide for the family. So it's a very recognized aspect in a separation. So the fact that some people say, "Oh, well, there's no value to it," there is.
No,
absolutely, there is.
Absolutely.
And it might be we can define that.
Might be useful if you were to give us the legal definition of separation. Is that something you've got off the top of your head, or am I putting you on the spot?
You might be putting it on the spot a little bit.
Yeah.
So the court actually looks at, have you told everybody you're separated? Mm-hmm. Even if you're a de facto or a marriage, have you presented to the public that you have separated? Will you be able to have two people sign a declaration or an affidavit saying that they understand you to be separate? Now, this is usually along the lines of a divorce proceeding where they're married and we have to tell the court that they've been 12 months separate.
Yeah, that's the thing is you've got to be 12 months separated, don't you? Yes.
Yeah, before you can, which blew me away. Being an American, we can hop over to Vegas.
Oh, right. Okay.
And gain residency and file within an X amount of days. So the idea that you have to wait 12 months to actually file for a divorce was very, very confronting to me.
Oh, okay.
Not like I'm looking for a divorce, honey.
No.
But it was one of those things like, why would I have to wait for 12 months? But it is. So, and again, in that process of the breakup and of the separation, the whole point is you have to let people know. It gets dicey if you're sharing the same room versus you have separate rooms in the house. It's very dicey if you decide that you're still cohabitating in some ways physically, where maybe. So there's all these other little extemporaneous aspects to it. But really, if you both have decided we're separated, I'm living in this room, he's living in that room, or I live upstairs, he lives downstairs, however you define it.
Yeah.
But it has to be presented outward.
And is that so? If you're going through litigation, do you need to provide some level of evidence that that's the case?
Well, usually that's the evidence that other people, family, not just family, but other people know you as being separated. But maybe you go to a party together, but we're separated, but we're attending the wedding, of a friend.
But would the court require an affidavit or?
I'm sorry.
Affidavit,
yeah. So you still have to have two witnesses basically say they understand to the court.
That you've been separated.
That you've separated. How did you know? When did you find out?
Right.
What date do you think approximately it was? Why was that? It was something that, how did you know?
How did you know?
They both told me. Somebody told me, the other one. But so there is some evidentiary requirements.
So part of my education process with new clients is when they're talking about, especially if I've got people still living under the one roof and some still sharing the same bed, is that I'm not going to ask for evidence. If you're telling me that you're separated and the other party's in agreement,
Yeah.
That's
But it's funny what happens at that 12th month when all this time they've been in agreement that they're separated, and then they realize that there's some property financial aspects that, oh, well, maybe this shouldn't be the separation date. Maybe this should be the separation date, so we can carve into it. Becomes a strategy.
yeah.
At
And
some
look,
point.
we have people who will use the end of the financial year.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Hey, again, for our process, I'm not going to, I don't need written
for
evidence.
my process, I have to ask those questions,
Yeah.
and then we start looking at, oh, wait, he says this date, she says that date, or somebody says one date, the other says the other date. My first thing is what happened financially in that time.
Yeah.
Did somebody get an inheritance? Did somebody win the lottery and not telling the other?
Yeah.
I mean, there's all these nefarious reasons that all of a sudden they've decided not to agree on the date.
Right.
So again, everything's good when you agree until you don't.
Till you don't, yeah.
But then it becomes evidentiary. Then it becomes how you're going to represent it to the court.
Yeah.
At that point, again, if it's for a divorce filing, that's one thing. If you're trying to find a property and parenting order out of the situation, those dates can become a little more fungible.
Fungible,
And then again, additional proof at that point. So, I mean, I've had folks come and say, well, we've been separated, and he's going to agree that it's separated. And then you go put the paperwork together, and you send it to them like, we didn't separate on that date. Ding, 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 red flag. All right, so now he's going to dispute it. But if you've gone to family gatherings or friends gatherings, friends has a wedding, and you both show up together or you show up separately, but you start telling everybody, yeah, we're separated, but we wanted to come here to celebrate. We're still friends, and everybody's like, oh, we're still friends, and that's great.
Yes.
My ex and I were friends until we weren't afterwards, and it became a big bombshell after that. So it happens, even with the best of intentions.
Yes.
And it's something to just consider.
Yeah.
There are plenty of cases where they come to me and they do agree. They'll disagree on everything else, but they agree on that separation date. Okay.
Especially if there's that was the date the police came and asked you to leave. Okay.
That was the date the police escorted the other person out of that family home. That's a separation date.
That works.
Can't argue that one. We got police documents now.
But I suppose, again, the biggest difference in our processes is yours is an evidence-based process. Mine is a good faith, goodwill process. So if both parties agree and both parties tell me that this is what they want, and I can get them to the point where they are comfortable with whatever they're agreeing with, then that's all we need. And I can get people coming through like days. Literally, what's the date of your separation? Is on the
3
phone
days
call?
ago.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. So, well, what? Let's have that initial conversation. Let's start the process. But we can take this as quickly or as slowly as you need. Yeah. But so there's some people who are really, really quick out of the blocks and want to get it resolved quickly, and I'm done. And
then honestly, it's to the benefit of everybody to pull that Band-Aid off.
Yes.
And to rip it.
But then there's the other ones that have been separated for 5 years and never formalised their agreement.
Exactly. 4, 5, 6 years, 10 years.
Yes.
We can have that discussion when we talk about the gray separation. And that'll be a different episode as well for folks who are generally over 60, and that number has increased, and their separations look much different than, say, 20-somethings, 30-somethings, just starting out. Both parties have really nothing. They're getting married.
Yes.
They're growing together. They're at that beginning phase, the honeymoon and then some. But at that point, again, it's one thing to consider, well, we don't have anything, so we really can't separate. I mean, even if we separate, there's nothing really to share.
Yes.
So let's just call it what it is. I get my car, you get your car.
Here we go.
We give up the lease on the apartment because we haven't bought anything yet. There are some things that are just that simple. Let's just keep it simple.
Yeah. But there are those where we've had them come through where, they both bought new homes, and the income shifted dramatically from who was primary then and whose primary income.
Kids have a tendency to make that change for you. Buying a home has a tendency to change that for you.
But I suppose the point, when people separate because there are a lot of people who separate and just sort it out themselves and go their separate ways. If you look at the stats, about 80% of people sort it out, maybe with a little bit of legal advice.
Yeah, or the other side just ghosts them.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
what do you
no.
do? They're done out
But
of there.
but if you have property, if you have assets in common, then you're leaving yourself vulnerable.
Well, but at the same token, if you going into a relationship, I think that even going into a marriage, there's going to be some vulnerability. You're not going to be able to ironclad, and this is when people are like, "Well, I want an ironclad."
Oh, I agree.
Prenup. It's like no such thing.
Yeah.
It's like they talk about these folks who have millions of dollars. They're like, well,
That's not.
do you have millions of dollars? Not really. Okay, well then,
I'm more thinking about people who separate, sell the house, give each other the dollars, and then move on, and then one of them repartners, and finds out that they haven't got a formal agreement. They could actually go and
start attaching things with the new.
And then everything.
The new
if you
relationship.
and I suppose what I'm sort of rambling around is, until you have a formalised agreement, my understanding is you stay financially connected, especially if you're married. Not so much if you're de facto.
There's a lot of things out post-separation situations. Absolutely, monetarily, the Family Law Act allows some aspects. So even though you're separated, but you haven't defined, so if you're de facto and you separated, the only real telling is that you have an agreement in place.
Yeah.
Usually a signed agreement works best. It gets hairy. It gets a little, fairy floss and unicorns if you don't have something specific as to what somebody can come back with. What was the intent of the parties? You start guessing everything. You start sussing out evidentiary everything. Yeah. What did you do? Why did you do that? What was the intent on this? Was this a relationship aspect? Was this a relationship asset? Oh, what if you have a relationship liability? You have a mortgage together, but you really didn't. Now you're tenants in common versus joint tenants, and I mean, there's all these little aspects that come into it that if you can just sit down with someone and just knock it out as, okay, well, he says he's getting this, great. You say you're getting that, great. No, everything's in agreement. Get it down on paper somehow, some way.
Some way. It needs to be some agreement. Where I find that there's a problem is where there are significant assets that one party assumes are theirs. And
I think it's more of an assumption. This is mine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We bought it with joint funds, but it's mine.
Yeah. I earned it. I bought it. It's in my name.
A lot of things it's not just in my name, but I bought it. It's mine. Mm-hmm. I earned it. Yep. I worked for it.
Yep.
My money went for it.
Yep.
And while we can say yes, 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 at the same time, well, if the relationship breaks down, the law looks at it a little differently.
Yeah.
Superannuation is a great point.
Oh, yes.
You think you're the one who's worked, you're the one who's paid into it, it's all mine. Mm. And well, I think the law looks at it a little differently, as far as the benefit to the parties, the superannuation split, splittable interest, who gets what, you get to divide it, you add it together, divide it by 2, and whoever has more has to give over to the other super to equalize it. That was another concept for me. I just, again, the idea that your retirement, and even in the States, I mean, retirement is absolutely an asset of the relationship, don't get me wrong. But the idea of equalizing it and then moving forward, I thought was kind of great.
I do too.
But I'm
not the one with the big,
super.
But again, I think that's one of the things where we can be a little bit more flexible. Not that super can't be part of the pool, because it has to be, obviously.
But how do you deal with it?
Yeah, but how you deal with it. I understand that if you want to keep all of your super, it has to come out somewhere else in the pool. So, but there's an opportunity for a negotiation.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That is,
and the parties may just agree that we're going to divide the property this way and keep the super.
This way, yeah.
Yeah, keep it this way.
Yeah.
So I don't want anybody to think that you can't negotiate. Everything's fair.
Yep.
on the table.
Yep.
And if you guys are in agreement and it looks like it's pretty 50-50, or maybe you have the kids, so maybe 60-40, 55-45, something to help, because, there's all these different formulas and percentages and reasons for the percentages shift. And
You've just created a hell of a problem for me talking about formulas, because I get asked always, what's the formula? Sorry, love, there's no formula.
There isn't really.
No, it's a discretionary jurisdiction, so really.
And let's highlight the fact that it is a discretionary jurisdiction. So there's a section on whatever the court deems justiciable and equitable. What does that mean?
It's like Mum said.
Mum said,
Mum
but
said.
that's a different.
Yeah, too bad. Mum said.
So who do you want to listen to?
Yeah.
Of course, there's tons of case law as to how they look at it. But again, it's individualized, I think, is really what people don't understand. There may be this blanket presumption as to what looks like in a split, but it's really going to come down to the facts. It's going to come down to the evidence. In my world, it's all about the evidence.
Yep.
He said, she said is not evidence. Really, in some ways.
That's, yep.
There's good evidence, there's solid evidence, there's no evidence. Circumstantial, we can name it whatever, we can call it, tulips for whatever we want to call it. But the point is that at that level, there really is, it's not so much a formula as it is, how do we account for all the assets? How do we account for all the liabilities? Superannuation's got to be part of this, at least for the consideration. All of this has to come in on the table. And then the parties can duke it out a bit. Yeah. That's so.
That's
I think you're very fair in saying it's discretion.
And
what do you guys want to agree on? Let's work from there.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
I think we should also touch on, so we've talked about you need to be separated for 12 months before you can get a divorce. In this country also, de facto relationships, they're
treated very similar.
Very, very similar.
Yeah. I mean, you could almost mirror the provision for a marriage versus the provision for de facto.
Except
just different numbers.
The 2 years.
The 2 years is huge. I think that's exactly it.
And if we're talking about separating, and so often I get people coming through who have not been in married relationships, children, houses bought, everything, a de facto relation,
all valid.
And I know somebody is stalling for that 2 years.
Well, and that's where it comes in as to the separation date discussion.
Yeah.
Because someone's like, oh, no, we separated this date. The other person says, oh, no, we separated 6 months later. Where does that come into consideration? Really, for a marriage, you have 1 year from the date of the divorce.
Yes.
For property matters to make those decisions or file.
Yeah. Or so get it started, we say, because we don't file.
Yeah, you don't file. We file.
Yeah, get it started.
But you have 12 months.
Yes.
You have to keep that framework. Yeah. So I know when the divorce comes through and it's final, I highlighted immediately to the client, 12-month clock just started.
Yeah.
And, if they're around and I think about it, I'll ping them again 3 months prior to the 12 months. I'll put them on my calendar. Just a reminder. Again, these are the ones that we agreed to divorce. We agreed to this. One client had quite a few children, various ages, 4 to 19.
Okay.
So quite a few kids. And I was like, well, but they didn't really have a parenting plan. They didn't have a parenting order. They didn't do a separation, or they didn't really do a property settlement either. So At the time he got the divorce, I was like, hey, just remember 12 months. He's like, yeah, we've all just gone our separate ways. He's got the kids. So, again, no big deal. So, again, 9 months, 9 months later, I had it on my calendar just as a, hey, how you going? Just making sure you understand 3 months, you're almost there.
Yes.
You're almost there to that 12-month point where, somebody can't come back. And so far, knock on wood, nothing did. I had another client, however, it was a de facto relationship as well, and they were younger. They pooled the monies to buy a house. When they separated, the one party left, one party stayed. We tried within the first 6 months of the separation to kind of get some idea about a property. Something really only the property was the house.
Yeah.
Everything else they left with what they came with already. Then radio silence.
Yes.
30 days before the 2-year mark. So de facto's you have 2 years. So again, big discrepancy. Marriage 1 year, de facto 2 years. And I got that phone call 30 days before the final day. And next thing you know, by the time the attorneys could start talking to each other, we had 2 weeks. So I was like, okay, now everybody's scrambling. Yeah, everybody wants to get evaluation. It's like, this is not going to get settled in 2 weeks.
No.
Somebody's got to file, and of course the other side filed. And because at that point, it was to protect their interest.
Yes.
My client was living in the house. But it's one of those things where, if you're not watching that calendar, you don't agree to a separation date. That's where these things get wonky.
Yeah.
But you're right. 1 year, 2 years, got to keep that in the back of your head. Me as the solicitor, I put that on. If they're my client and they've come on as my client, they're in my diary.
For us, we in those initial conversations, we'll say, "Are you separated?" And they go, "Oh, no, we're divorced." And we go, "Ah, okay.
Okay, when was that?
Where? Okay, did you realise?" And try and get them, on that treadmill to try and get the process, get process started, and get things rolling for them. Because you can. My understanding is you can actually make an application to the court after the 12 months or the 2 years.
But again, it's got to be some really good reasons, not just because you didn't think about it, or life events took you a different direction. Maybe there's got to be a pretty good explanation. It's not just because.
What I often hear is that it was because of family violence, not the level of family violence that would get an intervention order or
but any
financial
any amount of family violence is a good reason.
But there's no proof. So the moment they then have to take it to a judge, there's no proof. Because nobody's got an intervention order. There's been no hospital visits. It's purely he said she should.
Police visit.
No police visits.
There's no other welfare checks.
It's just I've been living.
That's kind of the insidiousness of family violence to begin with.
Yeah, exactly.
It's under the radar and it's easy. In my view, personal view, it's easy to keep it under the radar.
Yeah, and in property settlements and separation, I encourage people in those situations to make contact with somebody like myself or you early.
Yeah. So we can help manage that process.
Yeah. Just even inform you or to help point you in the direction of people who can help. Because, again, that's a big part of what we do is help people through.
Having those resources.
Yeah. Referring people on is a big part of what we do.
I am not a counselor. I am not somebody, I have worked in the field of the therapist and psychologist and homelessness and drug and alcohol programs all in Los Angeles. I've got some of a background, but I am not the person to talk to. I am not but I was like, okay, here's some numbers for this. Here's some numbers for that. Here's what we can do in the meantime. Here's how we can maybe preserve your rights under this particular scenario. But that's absolutely a quick, that's something we can suss out in a 30-minute consult, like you said. Bring them in. Let's have the conversation. Let's get things on track.
I'm sitting here, I'm thinking of a woman that I have been dealing with for nearly 2 years. I know I've been dealing with her for nearly 2 years, and she is in such. Her parents dragged her along to see me the first time and the second time. And at no point have we been able to get her to actually initiate the process. And I know what he's doing.
Well, but again, the autonomy says that they've got to make that choice. They've got to be the one to do that. Same with an addict.
Yes.
They've got to be the one to have that resolve on their own. Lead the horse to water. You can't make them drink or swim.
Yes, no.
But you can dunk their head in as many times as you want. Don't go to the school of Paula.
Basically, there are options. I mean, when people separate, there are options. Litigation may not be the first step, though.
Well, I would suggest it shouldn't be the first step, but we are here if that's what it is. But at the same time, there are many ways to separate in a positive way.
Yes.
That works for you, works for the other side, works for the family. We can work through all the property and parenting issues and challenges, whether it's at the mediation level. Again, I'm always going to suggest people try that first.
Which is why I love you.
I know. It's not that I don't want the work. Trust me.
Yeah.
But the whole point is if something can work, get it working first.
Yeah.
And if we can't get it to work, we can at least narrow down the issues. We can move forward with that. Because once you get into my world, between the advocacy, the litigation, and just the headbutts, the advocacy just becomes, as much as we want to try to mediate or to negotiate, I guess in my world we negotiate.
Yes.
It's not so much a mediation as it is a negotiation.
Yeah.
And then everybody's got this perception that, you've got to win. You've got to have that one in the W column. And compromise is a horrible word, and it's the dirtiest word of all in a negotiation. And it's funny because I even had that conversation with my husband. It's like, compromise is awful, he said. And I was like, how is it awful when both people get something more than they had before, but they're not getting everything they wanted?
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's still a plus for both sides. I'm still struggling with that concept that people think compromise means you're giving something up. Where it's like, if you didn't have it, you're not giving it up.
No. I explain it to my clients that if anybody walks out really, really happy, I probably haven't done a good job.
They should walk out a little frowny.
Both parties should feel a little bit uncomfortable.
I like the idea of perspective. Everybody should have a fresh perspective when they walk out, where they have a couple of wrinkles in their forehead when they do it. That means they're thinking about it, and that's fine.
Exactly.
That works.
Exactly. Too. So. So separating, bottom line is come and have a chat to somebody early on and then make some decisions around how you want to manage your separation. No matter how amicable you are, some form of formalised agreement is best for property, if not for children.
Yep.
There isn't any situation that really shouldn't at least be explored and discussed around what are your rights and obligations.
There you go, rights and obligations.
Obligations.
People forget that obligation part
people
a
have
lot. But
definitely.
they're there. Not just liabilities, it's the children too. You have obligations to the children.
Obligations, and to
that's
each
something
other.
that sometimes it gets confronting when you put it on paper maybe, but it's also a visual, it's optics, it's something that you can now sometimes it's easier to put your head around too.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah. Thanks again for joining us, and we will catch you on the next episode.
We will. Thank you.